Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on? I'm going back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Episode 6 of the Bacon and Egg Show. Nice, humid May 23rd, 2020. And let's jump right into it. Jay, what do you got going on?
Kerry,
Have a
what's
good
up,
week?
man? Yeah, man, pretty good week. Just trying to stay busy and keep my mind off of things that are going on, I guess, But no, it was a good week, and I've been looking forward to this. Lots of good stuff to talk about, and man, let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it. So, time for a little cup of coffee.
Cup of coffee.
I think the first thing we got on our list here, quick hitter in this cup of coffee, is the Dak Prescott negotiations with the Dallas Cowboys. What you got on that, Jay? What are your opinions? There's a lot of hearsay out there. So
Right. So, as I've mentioned on this show multiple times, I still think Dak's going to get, on average, I think his contract will be about $40 million. And I know that would make him the highest paid player. And whether or not he's worthy of that is not the issue here. I believe, though, that that's really sort of what they're pushing for. I know that Dallas wants a longer-term deal than Dak necessarily wants. So what I've been hearing is that the Cowboys want a fifth year on the back of that contract, and Dak is pretty stuck on 4 years unless that fifth year has $45 million attached to it, which in 5 years, that may be a bargain depending on what the market looks like. But for me, I still think that Dak's holding out for that around that $40 million a year range. And I think Jerry's going to cave just like he did with Zeke. What do you think?
yeah, I think he's going to, and I mean, but it makes sense though the way that when you talk about that potentially being a value down the road in that contract, like that makes perfect sense why the Cowboys would want to tack one more year onto that, because then they'll be in this situation in a few more years anyway, and probably paying much higher. So in a way, I don't blame either side for the kind of the holdup in this. I know Cowboy fans want this deal to get done and to move on from it and start prepping for whatever kind of football season there might be, but. Yeah, I don't blame Dallas for wanting to tack on an extra length on that term, and I don't blame Dak for wanting to get his money as well, because I mean I think he's proven it. I think he's deserving of whatever contract I think comes his way, especially given the contracts that have been going out to players over the last few seasons, like Matt Stafford and Garoppolo and these different players that, I mean, it's the reality of it, right? In the NFL, like you have to pay for average quarterback play even. So
Yeah, you can't. Your starting quarterback can't make $12 million anymore unless they're a rookie, which is why it's so important for these teams to win while the quarterbacks are on the rookie wage scale. And when you see Seattle, when they were at their best, it was when Russell Wilson was making like $900,000 a year as a third round pick or whatever.
Right.
So that's why Dallas right now. I don't know the exact percentages, but if I remember correctly, if Dak if he is going to make $38 million a year, $40 million a year, the percentage of the cap that he would take up, 30, it's a huge number as opposed to what it is now in his rookie deal. So that to me is another thing that's important for Dallas to think about during this whole process. But teams understand now to win with a quarterback on their rookie contract right now is the way to go about it, because you can afford to put all the rest of those pieces around it.
Yeah, and they're kind of in an interesting spot. Let's say they do get the Dak deal done. Like you said, that's a lot of money tied up, his percentage of the salary cap, but they also, just paid Amari Cooper $100 million. Zeke is still on his big money contract. A lot of teams that would kind of doom them in terms of being able to fill spots elsewhere, but I feel like the Cowboys have done a decent job with the draft and kind of keeping some pieces together on the offensive line and building around what they've had, especially on defense, to be a competitor. And I think it's kind of weird to say about the Cowboys building in that fashion, because that's something that's been one of the biggest critiques of that organization over the last 25 years, is that
we're not used to that for sure.
Yeah, and that, even if they sign Dak, where some other franchises you go, okay, well, they're going to pay him, but they're going to screw this up somewhere else over the next few years. I think they can still contend for another three seasons or so with this group, even though that much money is tied up into those star players. So
No, I agree. And that's why I think it's very important for them to get this done now so they know exactly what the resources are moving forward. So Dak can, you know, there's not really any doubt about it. Sorry, man, I keep getting up real quick. I got to
No,
fix
you're
something
fine.
here in the garage. But my point is, I would like them to get that done. I mean, if I was a Cowboys, I would want them to get that done as quickly as possible, just so I know what we have working with moving forward. And I would think as a franchise, you would want the same thing. Jerry likes the fact that the Cowboys are in the news right now. They're talking about the Cowboys. Everybody's talking about the Cowboys because of this. So maybe he drags this out just like he did with Zeke, and then at the last hour, flies out to wherever and makes the deal. But
On his yacht, his draft yacht that he was.
Yeah, this $350 million yacht.
Sail down the Trinity River there in Dallas out to the Gulf, and then out to California for the Cowboys training camp, and then hand deliver it from a helicopter or something. Just classic, just typical Jerry.
Classic Jerry Jones. Make a headline, make a splash. But yeah, man. No, but I think it's going to get done. We both think that Dak's deal is going to get done long term, I think. But we'll see how it goes. A little bit of chicken right now, but it'll get done.
Yeah, it's all posturing. They'll get it done. Mm-hmm. It makes too much sense for both sides. They'll get it.
Absolutely.
Let's see, what do we got next in the cup of coffee here? Let's see, we've got Dak contract. Oh, so speaking of the NFL, with this, explain this to me a little bit. I think you saw a little bit more of this than I did about what kind of damage, if you want to call it that, would games without fans this season in the NFL, what would that do money-wise to the league and the franchises and so on?
So Forbes did a report based on revenue in the 2018 season. According to Forbes, fan-free NFL games would cost the NFL $5.5 billion with a B dollars, which is basically about 40% of the overall revenue of the league. So if that gives you any indication of how much the fans do matter in terms of money going into to these clubs, 40% of the revenue estimated comes from fans attending the games. So basically, when you look at a team like the teams like the Cowboys or the Patriots may have started to lose money anyway. Now that Tommy's left, Tampa Bay now.
I think I actually saw that not Tampa Bay, but New England has struggled with season ticket renewals to a degree. Like they've seen a decline in season tickets. It's like
Jarrett Stidham, Tom Brady. So, I mean, but the point there is the Cowboys and the Patriots on any given year would stand to lose a lot more than the Bills or the Bengals would, just purely off of fans attending their games and spending money there.
Yeah, they have a lot higher revenue to start with.
Right, exactly. So, but the problem on the player side of it is this would cost the players in the grand scheme of things too. According to the collective bargaining agreement, players usually receive between 47 and 48.5% of the revenue that comes in. So what does that do for a salary cap or for moving forward? That's going to severely handicap the ability for these players to sign these long-term deals. So I think that they're betting on the fact that there will at least be limited fan participation in these games in the fall, but that could be a huge hindrance in getting some of these contracts done moving forward.
Yeah, and I wonder if the thought process is that this is just kind of a one season blip that they're going to have to deal with this. If this was something that went into 2 seasons, God forbid, that's a real problem. Like I feel like the NFL with their financial situation as a league in general, they can probably weather this. I think it's an interesting point about the collective bargaining agreement with the players because, if you're a general manager and you come to a player like we're talking about the Dak Prescott thing and basically say like, look, this is just a 1-year kind of thing where there's going to be some revenue that's going to be, cut, but otherwise it's not going to affect your contract whatsoever. So don't be afraid of signing whatever. I don't know. I'm curious how much that's going to play into some of these negotiations. I guess more so for players that are going to be free agents after this season, because we'll know a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and that's tough, when you're going into a contract year and players are already, the deal behind it. Everybody knows you're at a contract. Your contract's coming up at the end of the year. Everybody seems to elevate their game a little bit when they're playing for their next paycheck. So how does that affect that? I mean, players are still going to want to get paid, and I think that may actually encourage more and more players to push that much harder. We may see some guys that we've never heard of this year that really take a step up because they want to be one of the ones that's going to get a big contract after this season. So we may see some players that haven't really ever stepped up that way before really step their games up because they want to get paid.
Well, and just a quick search here to see who's going to be a free agent after this coming season. I know some of these have to do with unrestricted and all kinds of things. So, and I don't know how legit this list is, but some of the names that jump out immediately, Dak Prescott, he's got the franchise tag, so technically he could be free to go, but Phillip Rivers, Von Miller, AJ Green's in that same kind of unrestricted, that UFA situation, Olivier Vernon, Melvin Ingram, Matt Judon. Like there's some players, Bud Dupree, Todd Gurley, depending on whatever happens with that contract situation there, Patrick Peterson, T.Y. Hilton. Like these are some names that could really, really be affected by this whole revenue situation for their contracts the next season. It's almost kind of like I bet they almost wish that they were free agents now.
Sure. But a lot of those guys, that's going to be their third contract too. Yeah. Most of those guys are of the age where they played on their rookie deal, they signed their second deal, and now a lot of those guys coming up are going to be on their third, and some of them maybe even fourth deal. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, like you said, because there may not be as much money to go around next offseason, depending on how this develops. So that'll be something really interesting to watch as all of this unfolds in terms of fans, revenue coming into the league, and what those contracts are going to look like.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. Well, Jay, I know this past week there was a very special anniversary in your life. One that
Kiss of death.
The kiss of death, Mario Ely's kiss of death. Tell us a little bit. Give us, for those that aren't familiar with it, tell the story here, the legend, the lore of that shot.
So this was Game 7 in the 1995 playoffs, and in a series against the Suns. And Charles Barkley was playing for Phoenix at that time and doing like Chuck does and running his mouth and talking a lot of trash about the Rockets, as most of Phoenix was at that time. The Rockets were a 6 seed. They ran through the gamut. That was that historic year where they were the 6 seed and won every single series without home court advantage. That was when they traded for Clyde in the middle of the year.
Yep.
And so the Rockets fought back that series, forced a Game 7. It was a back-and-forth game. Kevin Johnson had 47 points that night for the Suns. Barkley had 16 points, 23 boards. It was one of those games where if you look at the stat line and
it doesn't match up with it. Yeah.
It really doesn't match up. Hakeem had a rough start in the first half, but he had a stiff neck, I believe, that game. So basically, as the play was drawn up, Ely was the fifth option. He was the last option on the play, the way that it was drawn up. But, Phoenix is playing defense. They're guarding Hakeem and Clyde. They're guarding the superstars, right?
Yeah, someone probably had an eye on Robert Horry too, so I would imagine.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, absolutely. So the ball comes across half court, and it goes to Horry on the top of the right wing. So the defense shifts a little bit. Horry had already at that point in his young career had great vision. Cross-court pass, a skip pass to the opposite corner where Mario Ely is sitting there all by his lonesome. That beautiful – Ely had that shot, that little quick release. Doesn't even hit the rim. Nothing but net. Looks at the Suns bench, specifically Joe Klein. Kiss of death.
Kiss of death. And that's a wrap for the Suns there. That was if I remember right, Rockets were down 3-1 in that series, right?
Yep, that's right. They were down 3-1 in that series. They had to fight back without home court advantage, go to Phoenix. It had been since Dr. J. Dr. J-led team was the last team to win a Game 7 on the road in the playoffs before that. That tells you the historic significance of the development of that series and just how special that 94-95 Rockets team was.
Oh, yeah. God, it's crazy to think that it's been 25 years, but then it also, in a way, feels like it's been longer than that. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, it really does.
It's such a big number, but
those were the days. One more note on that. the trade on that season, Otis Thorpe was always one of my favorite Rockets while he was there. And when they had to trade him to get Clyde that year, when they traded Otis Thorpe to Portland for Clyde, I had mixed feelings. You obviously know that Clyde Drexler at the time was already deemed like one of the 50 greatest players to ever play the game.
Oh yeah, in the middle of his prime too.
So you know what you're getting with Clyde, and it turned out it was the right move. But Otis Thorpe was always somebody that I loved to watch play. And Hakeem himself said that year that he won that MVP award, the year before, that he doesn't win that without Otis Thorpe. And actually, there's pictures at the ceremony in that postseason where Hakeem's holding up the MVP trophy and Otis Thorpe is holding it up with him.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Hakeem knew it meant to him. So, anyways, that was just a little other note on there. I love OT, and I actually met him at an Austin Spurs game once.
Oh, nice.
When they were down, still playing at the convention center, and shook his hand. And if you know anything about Otis Thorpe, you know his hands are the size of – they're the biggest hands I've ever seen in my entire life in person. And when he shook my hand and like just totally just it was amazing. But he was super nice, and I talked to him for like 10 seconds and moved on. I didn't want to bother him too much. But anyways, that's my Otis Thorpe story.
Man, that's great. That's great. 25 years, man. It's nuts.
Yeah, kiss the death. I love it. I still have the Chronicle from that day.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to get it framed for the longest time, and now maybe living in the nostalgia right now may push me to get that.
Oh yeah, now you got to get it done.
Yeah, got to make it happen, man.
Well, moving on. Let's. We actually have our first listener submitted question from last week's show. We encourage more and more. Bring them on. But our first listener submitted question comes from our neighboring state of Louisiana, and the question for us is: can you guys project the LSU Tigers next season?
Tigers.
And I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, just looking at what they did this previous season, I'll say this, and the comparison that comes to mind immediately for me, thinking of what LSU is going to do, assuming that the 2020 season goes on in some form or fashion, and we actually, we do have college football. I think of the Auburn Tigers from 2010 to 2011. They went on that incredible run with Cam Newton that season, just record-setting type year. Just an incredible season for Auburn. But then the next year, so everybody kind of, Gene Chizik was the head coach, and going into that next season, they've lost so many players from that great team the year before, and they ended up going 9-5, I think, after the bowl game. Let me make sure that 8-5. So. And it was kind of the beginning of the end, I guess, in a way, for Gene Chizik from there on out, because he just really couldn't recapture that magic at Auburn because of Cam Newton, a generational type player. You could also, if it wasn't for Colt McCoy, argue the same kind of thing at Texas after the Vince Young, but and that's also a comparable situation because Texas went 9-3 the following season after winning a national championship. I guess what I'm getting at is LSU has to restock so much from last season. Looking, we'll kind of start with what personnel they're losing. I mean, Jay, we talked about this. How many do you have the number there right in front of you of how many starters they actually have returning for
Three
LSU?
Three offensive players, 5 defensive players, 8 total returning starters off of that team. That it doesn't matter who you are and what level you're used to playing at. If you only have 8 starters returning total and only 3 on the offensive side of the ball, even if you're LSU, you're going to have a tough time keeping that level of play where it was before. And obviously that was one of the most historic seasons in the history of college football last year as a team, with most likely the greatest college season for a quarterback in the history of the game. So you already know you're going to take a step back when you're looking at the returning talent, and LSU is loaded, period. They're going to be able to fill in these gaps, but it's still I would still be worried as an LSU fan about the end result. If you're expecting an SEC championship again, I think you'll be
Yeah.
disappointed.
Yeah.
But looking at this, just knowing that they only have that many players coming back, I think it's going to be important to know, one name that stands out to me is Ed Ingram, a guard that's going to get a lot of playing time for them. They only had one player coming back on the offensive line, and it's their right tackle. So Ed Ingram is a name that stands out to me in terms of being able to fill in the gap on that offensive line and really start to solidify them from day one. If he can do that, then I think that offensive line will bring a little bit of stability to the team in general once those big names start. Are there any names that pop up to you that are super important?
Coming back, I think the biggest name is Jamar Chase. I mean, he's the reigning Blitnikoff winner. We talk about how they lost not just Joe Burrow, but also like Justin Jefferson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, these guys on the offensive side. You mentioned the kind of worry or concern from LSU fans. I think the one thing that they don't have to worry about is the recruiting. They clean up, and I don't think that's going to be the issue. The guys that are coming in behind all these players that they're losing are extremely talented. And LSU's done a great job of developing these players. We talk about Texas and the recruiting, how they haven't been developed when they get on campus. Well, the players at LSU have been. So that if you're an LSU fan, that shouldn't be the concern. But I think it's just the sheer numbers of replacing players that they're facing that can make it a little bit of a bumpy season. But also just the level of who they have to replace. You mentioned Joe Burrow, the historic season he had, but also beyond the players, they have to replace Joe Brady, the coaching staff, who revolutionized that entire offense. That basically was the catalyst that created everything that Joe Burrow and the Tigers did last season on the offensive side. But they also lose Dave Aranda, who's now the head coach at Baylor. And, so they're replacing their defensive coordinator. All that being said, the schedule sets up fairly well for them. I don't think that this is going to be, I do think LSU is going to be a team that could, at the end of the season, still be in contention to win the SEC West. And the reason I believe that is because Alabama's got to replace a lot of players too. Tua's into the pros now. Who are they going to have step in at quarterback at this point? I know they have some young talent there at quarterback, but is it going to be Mac Jones? The kind of guy that come in and kind of the classic Nick Saban Alabama bus driving quarterback.
Right.
He's not as dynamic as someone like Tua, but they have to replace a lot of players. We don't really know what A&M is going to be. Are they going to turn some kind of corner at some point under Jimbo or not? Arkansas is Arkansas. And then the two Mississippi schools, now that Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach are in the state of Mississippi, that's going to make things interesting, but I don't know if they're going to be at the level yet this season to compete with LSU, Alabama. To me, Auburn is the one to keep an eye on. I think that's the one that returns a decent amount of players. They had a good season last year, but Jay, any thoughts on that before we jump into their schedule a little bit here and try to put together a number?
No, that's what I was going to do right now. Let's just jump into their schedule there. And for me, I'm looking at it, UTSA at the beginning of the season.
Win.
That's a win. Texas, the return game now, Texas going to LSU. I think that, Texas needs that win more than LSU does. And because I do think, to your point, that LSU doesn't need that victory to contend at the end of the year in the SEC West. I don't know. I'm not saying that they're not going to have their hair on fire ready for that game down there in Baton Rouge. But I do think that game will mean more to Texas in the immediate season.
Yeah.
And I think Texas wins that game. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's say – go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that game to me, beyond my interest, as a fan, is extremely intriguing to me because what is the biggest factor for LSU playing a game at home? It's the environment there in Death Valley and everything that they do, and that's the whole thing. With everything that's going on with COVID and all this kind of stuff, if you take that factor out of a home game for LSU, which is their great strength there, it's essentially like Texas going in with all the experience, all those things, not having to deal with the crowd. You take that factor out of it, that advantage for LSU. I do think Texas can win that game. I don't know if I have the faith we don't really know yet, and Tom Herman's coaching staff changes if they're going to be there. But I do think Texas can win that game on experience alone. But I just wanted to mention that kind of that thought I had about their maybe, even if they have a few people there, social distance, like 20,000 people, what kind of difference does that make for the
I think that's
LSU home field advantage?
I think that's something that's a great point, and I think something that teams will have to battle across the board in college football with
Yeah.
this upcoming season. So that's a really great point there as well. So maybe those home games don't carry as much weight, which is important because down the road when we're looking at their schedule, that's going to be an
Yeah.
important factor here. So
Yeah. Sorry. So we'll jump
no,
back into that. So
yeah, no, that was a great point to make. So we're looking at UTSA, Texas, Rice. So that's like LSU, in my mind, is 2-1 coming out of that. An Ole Miss game in week 4 to launch their SEC schedule. That's a wild card for me. Even if LSU has all of their fans in that stadium, the state of Mississippi has quite the personalities now with their head football coaches.
no
And
kidding.
and I think that's only I truly think that's only going to raise, unfortunately, for a fan of the Big 12 and somebody that's, like most people, I think, that are tired of hearing about the SEC dominance and all of this, most of the stories being talked about on the national level being about the SEC. I think Mike Leach and Joey Freshwater coming in the state of Mississippi, Kiffin will be. How come I thought of his nickname, his alias, before his actual name? Is that a problem?
Maybe not
That
for
I thought
you. I think that could be a
Yeah,
problem for him. If
yeah,
people,
maybe.
oh, Coach Freshwater. I mean, oh, Coach Kippen, sorry.
For those of you that don't know the Joey Freshwater story and Lane Kiffin, I encourage you to do a quick Google search. We won't hit on that today, but because that might take up a little bit too much time. But to keep going on with this schedule, Kerry. Then after the Ole Miss game, you look at Nicholls State win,
Win.
and then LSU going to Florida. That could be tough for them. That could be another loss, obviously.
Yeah, I think Florida is going to be pretty good this year,
I
and
agree.
they're bringing some people back, and they've stocked the cabinet pretty well there. And I just think that. But again, this whole home field advantage thing we talk about going to the swamp for LSU going to Gainesville, and like how much of a difference is that going to make? But I think Florida wins that game, at least at this point, what we know about them. And it's interesting that they get that Nicholls State game the week before, after playing Ole Miss. Some good strategic scheduling there before making
Sure,
that trip to Gainesville. So, but I do
absolutely.
think Florida probably wins that game at this point.
So to speed this up a little bit, I think that you and I both think that 6-2 after their first 8 games is reasonable. It could be a reasonable expectation just looking at the way that it's put together now. But then those last 4 games, Alabama coming to town, South Carolina coming to town, and then you go on the road to Auburn and on the road to A&M. I think LSU, with the way that their schedule is built, can front load a few wins, and then the direction that the rest of their season will be in those last 4 games. What say you?
I agree, and I think what makes that last stretch there of 4 games really, really intriguing is that there is no built-in break. A lot of times we see in these SEC schedules that something like that Nicholls State is plugged in there in the last week or 2 of the season as kind of a breather for teams in the SEC before getting into rivalry games and conference title games and all those things. I mean, there is no bye week in there. I mean, it's like you said, Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn, A&M, back to back to back to back. I think I could see a 2-2 finish there. But the problem is I don't know exactly where to pin those 2 on each side. Alabama loses a lot of people, and that's where but just the nature of that rivalry, you don't know. It'd be hard to say, well, that's because it's in Baton Rouge, that's going to be an LSU win. We don't know. I think they beat South Carolina. That's in Baton Rouge. Unless South Carolina gets on some kind of run that instills more confidence in me and them, I see them winning that. I think going to Auburn is going to be a loss because as I mentioned a minute ago, I think Auburn's going to contend for that division just based on what they return, and who knows with A&M, So I think that all being said, if we go 2-2 there, mention if we're right on our 2-2 number there at the end, 8-4 regular season number sound about right to you?
I think that's very fair. I think they'll win one they shouldn't. I think they'll lose one they shouldn't somewhere along the line with the amount of or lack of experience on this team. I feel like 8-4 is probably a very safe forecast. And with a team like that going into the end of the season, I think those games will be tough. But when you're only bringing back those 8 starters, the rest of those guys get those. Just like when you talk about a freshman at the end of the freshman season in a bowl game, they're not freshmen anymore. You know, in the grand scheme of things, they're not playing like freshmen anymore. When you're bringing on these new starters, by the end of the season, you look at a bowl game for LSU. I think 9-4 with the bowl game. If they don't make the SEC title game, I think a 9-4 record with the bowl win is a very fair and safe forecast for LSU this coming season.
I agree. The last thing I'll say about that is that the thing that intrigues me most about LSU this upcoming season, we all know, like we've said here, we all know they're talented. We all know they're going to refill the lineup with quality players that are going to go on and have great careers in the NFL, like LSU guys have for the last decade, 20 years, however long. What's going to be interesting for me is how they do it. And this is going to be to me the real test of what level coach Ed Orgeron really is. And was last season a foundation for the kind of program that he's going to have going forward, or was it the anomaly and just a perfect storm for that program? And I think that's the thing, if they go 8-4, that's one thing, but how do they look doing it? Is it going to be something resembling last season's LSU? Even if the wins aren't quite there, but they're entertaining to watch, the offense is explosive, or is this going to be reverting back to the LSU of previous years that had, players like Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and these explosive players, but they weren't scoring points. And they look, it was like the Les Miles type teams. So to me, that's going to be the most intriguing thing. Is this going to be the Gene Chizik after Cam Newton, where things kind of start sliding and the fans go, okay, maybe this wasn't what we thought it was?
Right.
Or do they continue on the upward trajectory and just kind of reload? And at the end of the season, we go, next year, 2021, they're just going to contend again.
How do you respond after losing a generational quarterback? How does your program bounce back? And we'll learn a lot about Edo here real quick. He's already so loved in that state. People would do anything Edo told him to do, man. Orgeron is a likable dude. He lives and breathes LSU football, and he really represents that program really, really well. And I think that they'll bounce back. They'll be fine, not to the level that they were before, but it'll be interesting to see with new offensive staff, new defensive staff, the direction that he takes that. And they'll have a good enough season where LSU fans, I don't think you have to worry about not wanting to watch your team towards the end of the season. I think they'll still be excited.
Yeah. I agree. And thank you for that question being submitted there. That's good discussion. I encourage more questions from the listeners. Submit them however you like. Reach out to us or leave them on the YouTube page. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like the page if you
smash the subscribe and like.
And all right, well, what do you think, Jay? You want to take a break here? Then we'll come back and jump into some stuff. I think what are we talking about here? We got the Texans. We got some other Astros Crush City segment there.
Yeah,
get into a little baseball. And
we got Texans, we got Longhorns, we got Astros, and we'll have the breakfast wrap on the other side too. So let's take a quick pause for a good cause, and we'll be right back, guys.
All right, see you in a second. Welcome back, everybody. We have a the most special guest and friend of the program joining us today. This is another great surprise. Fresh back from, I think it was the social distancing tournament in Mexico.
In Tijuana, brother.
Yeah. How did that go? By the way, this is Toro Queso for those that have not met this legend.
Look at the face, brother. It's Toro Queso. Yeah.
So how'd the social distance wrestling tournament go? How does that even work?
I threw a lot of chairs and I did some DDTs on myself. I actually lost. I don't even want to talk about it.
All right. Well, I know what you do want to talk about, and that is your beloved Houston Texans. And there was your Texans have been in the news a little bit this week. They've decided to reopen the facilities off of Kirby and only let in a maximum of 10 people at the stadium. What do you think about that, Toro?
Oh, I really like it a lot. You got to get the stadium open again. Get some people back in there, especially Bill O'Brien, because he's the most important person in that organization, especially in his own mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, do they really need to allow in 10 people when you've got Bill O'Brien? He does the job of everybody in the organization. You really only need the one. Oh, no, I think we lost
Oh,
Toro.
I got a because you mentioned O'Brien again, and I knocked down the camera.
Oh, I didn't know if someone had thrown a chair from distance or something. I glad you're okay.
None of my enemies know I'm here, man.
Okay, well, we'll keep them hot off your tail there. So let's a little bit more on the Texans. I heard
I was gonna say that O'Brien has even started to sweep up the locker rooms because he wants all of the jobs in the organization, and I love it.
Well, that's good. That's a real team player then. You know,
What a
why
guy.
yeah, why hire anybody else when you can do the job yourself, you know?
O'Brien's a tower of power. He's too sweet to be sour. Yeah.
I can't believe I'm be thinking of Bill O'Brien too sweet to be sour from here on out. But I heard your favorite player, Carlos Hyde, has gone to the Seattle Seahawks. Toro, what do you think about that?
I was disappointed that they didn't bring him back. 1,000 yards last year. Really performed well in some tight spots for them. I'm disappointed they're not bringing Hyde back. But the trade for David Johnson will hopefully pan out and give them an option for the entire season. I hope so, and I believe in O'Brien, brother.
All right. Well, that's I take solace in your faith in O'Brien. The Texans will be fine this year. 16-0, right? Is that the
All the way, brother, Super Bowl bound. I gotta bounce out of here now. But don't you let me hear you talking bad about the Texans, brother. I'm out of here.
what? Again, he just runs away. I didn't even have a chance to ask him about like the concession options at NRG Stadium for this coming season or anything of that sort. The people want to know, but I don't know. Maybe next time. Well, Jay always misses him too.
Oh, hey, man.
Hey, you missed Toro Queso again.
Every time he tells me he's going to come by, and every time he never tells me. That guy's elusive, man.
Yeah. He had to go. I think he was worried about me ratting him out a little bit. His location. I think he's worried about chairs flying at him from the social distance wrestling tournament, the whole thing. But
I heard about that. I heard he didn't fare very well.
He looked great. I mean, it didn't look like he had lost the tournament. I mean, he looked fine, but you know, it's hard to tell with that guy.
You never know what you're going to get with him. You never know what you're going to get with him. Yeah. So what are we talking?
Well, I mean, was going to discuss Texans, but he covered everything on that front. So
that's all right. There wasn't much going on this week anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I didn't know he was such a big Bill O'Brien fan. So, well,
to me, he's a good guy, but I question him sometimes with his love for O'Brien. You know, I go back and forth with him on that a little bit, but he's loyal to a fault, man.
He loves his team.
He sure does.
Loves
it's
his
crazy.
team.
It's crazy. He's the ultimate fan, man.
Yeah, what a guy. So let's jump into another one of your favorite segments, at least, from QB1, the famous.
We're back.
All right. Well, how on the back scale, how back is Texas this week since our discussion last week?
Well, in my mind, they're still not back, just like they still weren't back last week. We're still losing a lot of those recruiting battles that I would like Texas to start to come out good on the other side of. You know, this is the cycle of this is the time of the recruiting cycle where some of these high schoolers are decommitting and they fell in love with the school on their first visit, and then they realize maybe there's greener grass somewhere else. And so, you know, when you have those players that are making decisions, which not to any fault of their own are good, smart business decisions at this point, that's sort of the thing for me is I look at those recruiting battles, and that's where I want Texas to start winning again. We mentioned last week. So that's why we're not back.
Yeah, I think Texas is less back this week than last week. I think it was last show we touched on the Princely Uman Milan article from CBS Sports, the Florida Gator commit who talked, in a local Austin area kid that talked about why he decided to go to Florida over Texas. And like clockwork, another story from CBS Sports comes out this week of another Texas recruit, and someone can correct me on the pronunciation here. I might have it wrong, but Tunmisi Adele, a big time recruit, a defensive lineman, is chosen to go to Ohio State over Texas, and his reasoning was basically look at the production that Ohio State has had putting players into the National Football League. And just like with the Princely conversation, he's not wrong. What do you think? I mean, where do you stand on this?
No, I have no problems when players are looking at this and making a true business decision, because one of the things that our close personal friend Bucky Godbolt has mentioned to us in passing and on his own radio show here in Austin on 104.9 The Horn is that these players all think they're going to the NFL.
Yeah.
When he was at Texas and was a really heavy in recruiting, for those of you that don't know, Bucky Godbolt is one of the main reasons that Ricky Williams came to Texas. He was Ricky Williams' lead recruiter. And we'll touch on Ricky in a little bit, but Bucky will always tell you that all of these players that are coming in as freshmen, they all think they're going to play in the NFL. And I don't mind that, actually.
Especially ones that come to programs like Texas and Ohio State.
Exactly.
And yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So from that standpoint, they're making business decisions for themselves, and it makes total sense. So I don't fault these kids for making those choices.
Yeah, I completely agree. His reasoning behind it is sound, and I think it's, but it's just another, another shot at the program and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to build. I just find it interesting that it's, back-to-back weeks of stories from CBS Sports. And again, we can talk about the relation that CBS has with the SEC and all that kind of stuff. But I just find it interesting that it's stories about kids from Texas, and we're not, I would think if this is some kind of targeted campaign from this, from CBS against a non-SEC program, I mean, you'd think like Clemson and Ohio State would be the ones that would get targeted for that. So I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence that it's Texas, but it's fascinating. Back-to-back weeks, and here's stories of recruits talking about why they didn't go to Texas. I don't know.
And it makes sense, and that's not a brand new thing, obviously, but it's just becoming much more in the forefront now as Tom Herman has really picked up his recruiting. Let me rephrase that. Tom Herman has picked up recruiting for the University of Texas since he started. The types of players that he's recruiting are developing into NFL-type talents.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this on this show multiple times, how once Herman's recruiting classes, our seniors and juniors, are draft eligible, that we're going to see the NFL draft numbers pick up again. And that's going to help Tom Herman as long as he's still the coach at the University of Texas. That will obviously do nothing but help his recruiting efforts moving forward. And that's when you see a program like Texas take that next step, take that leap into the next, being a part of that considered top tier again, and not just somebody that is a blue blood name that people want to watch because of the name.
Yeah. And we, as much as we can kind of criticize these, the things that Princely and Tunmisi and stuff say in these articles about wanting to go to the NFL, and people take offense to that. Well, change that.
Right.
If you don't want recruits in your own backyard making that judgment on your program, change it. Start putting players in the NFL again. That's the only thing that's going to change that discussion and take that argument away. And so, yeah, but I agree. I think it's on, for the most part, on the up and up. Even if the wins weren't there last season, you can see the talent. And hopefully they continue to stock up and get better players in, which leads into another interesting little news note on that regard was the decommitment last night of Landon King, the 3-star tight end. This one's interesting to me. He's, we say he's a 3-star, but apparently it's one of those kind of uncovered, or undiscovered kind of talents that going into his senior year this year was really going to blow up onto the scene. And Texas was on him early. He committed to Texas just a month ago, and even mentioned in like an interview after committing, the reason that he committed was just because Texas was on top of him so early and showed him love early and was really recognized him early on, and he wanted to stay home. Now he decommits. And this, I don't know, it's interesting to me, just weeks after committing. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time and kid gets cold feet and backs out, but this quickly is interesting.
Yeah, well, when you've never had a girlfriend before and one of the prettiest girls in your school comes up to you and says that they want to hang out, you're going to do that. And I think that's what he did with Texas. I think it bodes really well for Texas' chances moving forward to get back in, because they were that sort of quote unquote first love. So I wouldn't count Texas completely out of this by any stretch of the imagination. I think that Herman will stay on him, and we'll continue that line of communication with him. So, teams like, when he talks about teams like Georgia and Alabama and Texas A&M coming after him, well, obviously now we're talking about, okay, he sees that, and now that those bigger names are interested, he's probably thinking the same thing about his draft prospects and things of that nature. So, but the fact that Texas was in on him so early, I think that bodes well for at least Texas being able to have a way into the back door towards the end of his recruiting process.
Yeah, and tight end has been an interesting position for Texas in this recruiting cycle. The first commit that they had at that position was a kid from Lake Travis named Lake McCree, which I don't know if you can come up with a more Lake Travis name.
It's a very,
than
very
that.
Lake Travis name. Yeah.
Yeah, he's either from Lake Travis or he's a lacrosse player. Hell, he probably plays lacrosse too. But he was a commit to this class early on. He was close, obviously with Hudson Card, the quarterback commit in this previous class that was also from Lake Travis. And this seemed like a pretty promising tight end recruit. Then Texas gets a commitment from Juan Davis, another kind of big, interesting prospect there. And apparently McCree didn't take too kindly to the commitment of Juan Davis. He kind of wanted to be the prime tight end target in this class for Texas. So he decommits, but from things that I had heard, it was more Tom Herman processing out and kind of gently letting Lake McCree out of the, kind of a thanks but no thanks, even though we offered you, you're not our first choice kind of thing. And maybe that had to do with Landon King being on the radar. So does Texas circle back around on someone like McCree, who's top 10, that was released, I guess a month or two ago, but his top 10 consists of Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Penn State, USC, Michigan State. Texas is still in there. Washington. It's a pretty prominent name. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out after kind of telling a kid thanks but no thanks. A local kid at that.
And, Herman will circle back around. He's a smart enough guy to understand that these kids live in the moment. They're living for the shiniest object in front of them right now. And again, I don't fault them for that. That's just when you're a 16, 17-year-old and you're making these types of decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life. I don't mind these decommits. I don't mind them going through this process. Yeah. And just the fact that they were on the radar at one point, again, I feel like that bodes well for Texas to maybe hop back in later. But
yeah,
tight end at Texas has been a problem for who's the last great tight end Texas had?
David Thomas.
Yeah, David Thomas. I was thinking Bo Scaife, David Thomas. Like those are the names. And how long?
Jermichael Finley had a really great game against OU that one year, but
that one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a better pro than he was in college.
100%. I was about to say that we're on the same page there. He was definitely a much better pro than a Longhorn. However, we'll see how this develops. I'm not jumping to anything here with a lot of these early, with these kids early in their commitment processes. Yeah. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, it's such a roller coaster. The people that follow recruiting super, super closely, I don't know how they manage it on a day-to-day basis, because it's just you're dealing with 16, 17-year-old kids trying to decide where they want to go to college, and there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in that, and there's plenty of good players to go around. You just got to develop them. But well, you mentioned that you had a little teaser about Ricky Williams earlier. Is there something you want to get to about old Rick?
Oh, Ricky just had a birthday this week. I think he turned 43, and I have a couple of Ricky stories. Ricky, so the loudest sound in my mind anyway, one of the loudest sounds that I've ever heard in person was in 1998 against Texas A&M at Texas Memorial Stadium. Ricky Williams breaks the rushing record on the big 60-something yard run, gets into the end zone and scores a touchdown. Everybody knew that he had broken the record because he only needed like 5 or 6 yards at that point. And then he breaks out, and then Wayne McGarity is blocking all the way downfield, sprints past Ricky, makes that last key block and gets Ricky into the end zone. And that explosion when he crosses the goal line and the ref goes like this was one of the loudest sounds that I've, if not the loudest sound that I've ever heard in person in my entire life. And I got to tell him that story at a Reliable Automotive event one time here in Buda. I actually got to tell him that story. Not that he hasn't probably ever heard that before, but I wanted to express that to him, that it's that moment that involved him really stood out to me over the, that was 22 years ago. Wait, 98, 22 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, that was cool. I still have the ticket stub from that game. I actually think I gave you the other one.
Yep, I've got it. It's on this bookshelf right behind me, up in this action. It's up there with the Augie Garrido baseball and the good stuff up there.
But anyways, I just wanted to mention Ricky's birthday, and I have a couple of. I met Ricky again at an HEB autograph signing they were doing. Oh, it was for Bud Light, and they brought Ricky, and the local distributor did, to sign autographs to promote Bud Light, and talked to him again for a little bit, and then there
we go.
You can see the old picture there, 2J Hookem, Ricky 34, all that stuff. So that's important to me. Ricky was one of those people that when I was in my formative years of learning about University of Texas and what it stood for and what it meant to be a Longhorn, Ricky was very key in that process for me. So I wanted to mention him today and tell him happy birthday, because I know he'll listen to this at some point. We'll get it to Ricky.
Yeah, one way or the other.
But anyways, yeah, Ricky's the man.
Oh, I love Ricky. Yeah, he's one of those. I always appreciate. I mean, beyond like him being one of the greatest players to play at Texas ever, and one of the great college football players of all time. I always just appreciated Ricky for being an outside the box thinker. I know he kind of became a punchline, a little while, when he was in the NFL, for kind of going on this sabbatical and his, the whole issues with smoking and all that stuff but now people kind of look back on that. We talk about the opioid issues in the NFL with players. They're pushed, for responsible use of cannabis to help with their pain management issues and things like that. And people look back at Ricky and go, well, this guy was ahead of the curve by 10, 15 years. That his body was getting beat up. He had to walk away from the game and get himself right and get his mind right and all those things. And I think that's what I've always appreciated about Ricky, is that he definitely, to use the cliche, like he marches to the beat of his own drum. And I think that aspect alone makes him such a great representative for UT, as a place that wants people to be independent thinkers and march to their own drum. So I think that's what I love about Ricky the most. And
yeah, no doubt about it, man. I wish he was held in higher regard for his professional career, because he still had a lot of rushing yards.
Yeah.
He still had put up some pretty impressive numbers. That trade that Ditka made for him on draft day, basically he traded the whole draft for Ricky. And I just, because he has that gap in there when he just took off, and with the marijuana stuff that he was having to be tested and going through that program with the NFL and not wanting to deal with it. I wish he would have been able to play a full NFL career and really be held in that, in terms of the grand scheme of the game, the history of the game. But Ricky still had a good pro career, and I think he would tell you that he was happy with how it went, all things considered. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think I think I've heard this before, but just I guess his relationship with Earl Campbell kind of pressed that, you know, seeing the decline in Earl's physical condition later in life, I think really changed Ricky in terms of how his approach, in that how much more could he take kind of thing. And it's I don't know. The whole thing is just fascinating. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't strike me as the type to have any regrets about the way that it went and what he did. He seems totally at peace with how he handled it and where he's at in his life now. And um, it's a guy, he's welcome anywhere in Austin.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't have to pay for a thing ever again in this town. So
Yeah, and you shouldn't.
yeah. So happy birthday to Rick, and many more healthy birthdays going forward. So
Absolutely. Man, let's jump into some Astro stuff.
let's do it. Oh, we haven't talked enough Astros on this show yet. I mean, mostly because of, coronavirus. This is the time of year where these shows will be really, really Astros heavy. And hopefully we'll be getting to baseball soon. That's a, different discussion about more sports opening up, and we'll see. But yeah, what do you want to get into on the Astros front?
Yeah, let's get into this. I think when we're talking Astros, I think we'll call this our Crush City segment. So Crush City Astros talk. Saw this earlier in the week. LeBron's company, what's it, like a entertainment company, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, he's
They
like
did
a production company or something,
production,
right?
that's the word. Thank
Yeah.
you. So LeBron's production company did a documentary about the 2017 Astros, which,
Oh, I wonder what that could be about.
if you've been living under a rock for the last couple of years, the Astros were caught cheating, were caught breaking the rules, doing things that they were asked not to do during that 2017 season. And so the documentary is, basically going into those details. So because of that, Alex Bregman was actually, his agent was Brody Schofield, who worked for Clutch Sports, which was founded by Rich Paul, who is the agent for LeBron James. So because LeBron's production company made this film, Bregman no longer wanted to be a part of anything associated with LeBron James, even if it was his agent. So Bregman decided to leave his agent because of this documentary. How do you feel about that?
I get it. I get it. I totally would understand what the sentiment behind Bregman's decision there. I guess my only thing is if the Astros and the players and however want to just disassociate with anything that's going to paint the events involving the trash can banging scandal and all that kind of stuff, they're going to start running out of a lot of options soon. This is one of those things where the more, I almost kind of feel like the more that they do these kinds of things is the more it brings it kind of back out into the light, and it kind of paints the Astros and, in this case, Bregman in a, I don't want to say this is like putting it like in an unfavorable light, but it just kind of, it seems a little fussy and a little, I don't know, like, what do you think? I mean, I guess I should, if the Astros really just wanted to move on and just have this thing go away, then stop doing stuff like this.
I agree. And Bregman already has a reputation as being a cocky,
Yeah,
who thinks very highly of himself, which he should. He was the runner-up for the MVP last year. Like, there's no doubt that he's that high level of a player and holds himself to that sort of standard in terms of where he sits in the hierarchy of baseball players. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people being cocky and confident and brash, and especially if you go out and you back it up on the field. I don't have issues with players doing that. However, I think this is a pretty weak move.
it's petty.
On his part. Petty is a great way to
petty.
describe this, and it's not helping the look. And I guess I'm not mad at him for making this choice in his personal and professional life, but
No.
petty is the right word. Absolutely.
It's petty, and that's just, I think that's kind of the whole thing. At some point, the Astros are going to have to kind of atone for everything that happened, and we can talk up and down all day about the punishment. Was it fair compared to what other organizations got? I think we discussed that on a previous show about the Red Sox punishment compared to what the Astros received, and but at some point you can't just throw the toys out whenever you get mad and throw a fit and pretend that this stuff didn't happen, because it did. And there's going to be documentaries on it. This is just another thing for someone to ask Bregman about in the clubhouse after a game. Well, I don't want to talk about the cheating scandal. Well, then why'd you fire your agent? That's newsworthy. You just did that. So the more they do these things, the more and more it gives people opportunity to keep bringing this stuff up and to keep talking about it. And but if it gives them an edge and it makes them want to compete and win games, then okay, whatever mental tools they want to use for that. But yeah, I just think it's petty.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But it's
Again,
his
like you
money.
said, yeah, it is his money, and it's his choice and who he wants to be his agent and all that stuff. That's fine. I don't, whatever. But it just with the way that it's presented, it does seem very, very petty and almost, I don't want to say childish, but it just seems like it is a big decision, and people change agents a lot all the time. It's nothing new. People change agents, but for the fact that you did it specifically because of this, and he's already one of the ones that has been very unapologetic, very just whatever, man, we won, deal with it. And, like sort of, kiss the ring sort of thing,
You
like
didn't buy his prepared apology statement when spring training opened, when they rolled him out on the podium and he read that prepared, "I'm really sorry for everything that happened" statement.
It was like Tiger Woods type robotic,
Yeah. Oh,
like,
sorry we got caught.
the course played good. I feel
like
good.
my chances.
I like my chances. Yeah. So, I mean, like it's the typical robotic. It was garbage when they did it then. This is sort of petty now. So hopefully for their sake, because the season hasn't started yet, and maybe this will all be blown over by the time they get things rolling again. I doubt it, because people are going to want to ask those questions and get those sound bites. I get it, but we'll see.
Yep. And the Astros have not done themselves any favors with how they've handled it either. So
Zero.
they'll do their own damage bringing it back into the news, I'm sure. So let's see. So speaking of another Astro, Carlos Correa apparently is looking into some kind of sport crossover action here. You want to talk about that a little bit?
He did an interview earlier this week where he mentioned that he would love to try MMA. He's a big MMA fan. He went to the UFC event when it was in Houston, him and his buddy Lance McCullers, who also plays for the Astros, if you're unaware. They went down, and Dana White gave him the red carpet treatment and all that stuff for the event. And Correa has a podcast actually, and they talk MMA on it a lot. He correctly predicted the main event from the last big thing. He's knowledgeable about it. He did boxing growing up as a kid and said, "Oh, I get hit a lot less playing baseball. Let me do that." So he's got this itch, for like, he loves MMA. This is the same guy that allegedly broke a rib.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this.
Getting a massage.
Yeah, I don't know if MMA is going to be the best thing for him if allegedly it was a massage that broke his rib, allegedly.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with anything else that
I have my ideas. However, I will not present them today in this format. But regardless, if you take it on its face value, it seems to me like this was more of just oh yeah, I'd love to try MMA. Not necessarily like I'm going to cross over, but the fact that he said that, like those words came out of his mouth, that he would love to try MMA, it was a little bit funny to me.
Yeah, let's save it for the off season, Carlos. Let's wait till and then we don't need any more broken ribs for extracurricular activities. So
What do you
Well,
mean extracurricular? What? Oh, never mind. Well, we'll leave that.
I have no idea. It's all for rumor. Well, we're kind of up against time here. I know we had a few things to hit on in the breakfast wrap. Do you want to? We'll kind of rapid fire these things
Yeah.
here in
Well,
the interest of time.
let's burn through them real quick. So NBA best NBA plan going into the breakfast wrap. Best NBA plan so far has been Disney World. Do you think they can pull it off?
Yes.
I agree, and I
Yes.
think they will. I think they will too.
Yes, and one quick thing on that, the NHL has kind of discussed a similar type of plan for their playoffs. Two hub cities, one out east and one out west. The one out west that keeps being thrown around is Las Vegas due to the hotel situation and everything that they can successfully isolate teams and players out there to be able to have a tournament-style playoff for the Stanley Cup. I think the NBA plan, something similar where they can really control the environment, would work great.
I agree, and I think that both of those leagues will make it happen, and their seasons will be completed. XFL 3.0. Vince McMahon is apparently trying to, even though he filed for bankruptcy, Vince McMahon was not the owner of technically, according to paperwork, was not the owner of the XFL. So now word is coming out that he's trying to buy the XFL again and launch it again as XFL 3.0. How do you feel about that?
I respect Vince McMahon's very Trumpian approach to bankruptcy loopholes here. This is I took this kind of like, well, I wasn't the owner, and now I'm going to buy it after the bankruptcy. Like, pretty smooth move. It's you can't have three strikes without a third pitch, right? So this is going to be the third shot for the XFL. I have a really hard time seeing how this is going to end up being successful. If it hasn't stuck yet, if any of these alternative football leagues haven't stuck yet, I just don't see it happening.
And they had a little momentum this year,
Yeah.
They had some good teams. There was some decent ball being played. Some of it wasn't easy to watch. Some of it was good football. Names like P.J. Walker for Houston, who have already signed with P.J. Walker signed with the Panthers.
Yeah.
There are offensive linemen that have gone through and have gotten deals in the NFL because of this. So it wasn't that there wasn't any talent there, but you're right. Like the pandemic obviously didn't help the XFL this time around, and I think they may have been able to stabilize and put out a product for a few years. But it's tough, especially right now, to see this being successful in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They'll give it another go, but I just don't know if it's long term.
Agree. Mike Trout rookie card this week with the bid and then the buyer's fees on top of it sold for $900,000 this week. It's a 2009 Bowman Red Refractor with the Mike Trout autograph on it. It was graded, which if you're into baseball cards or anything for that matter, memorabilia, the grading system matters a lot. Graded cards are worth more. It was graded almost mint condition, like 9.5 out of 10, and then the autograph was given a 10. In the world of baseball cards, I'm a baseball card nerd. Those things really matter. And Mike Trout being the once in every 50 years, if you will, even type of a player, somebody really felt like it was necessary to spend $900,000 on one of his first ever cards. And it is a very limited, I get it, it's a very limited card, but $900K, man?
That's a lot of dough. Where does that, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but where does that rank in like the most expensive cards of all time? That's incredible.
I'm not sure, because I'm sure like the Honest Wagners, like the old tobacco cards are in the million, 1.2, probably 1.3. I don't think that was the most expensive card ever purchased, but for a modern card, absolutely, it blew everything out of the water.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
that's absolutely insane.
Man. That's why. What would you spend $900 on a piece of memorabilia?
Well, there's a couple different questions there. There's the would I, or how bad am I going to get yelled at if I spent $900 on?
Yeah, that just plays into the point though.
If I spent $900 on a piece of memorabilia, it's going to end up costing me a whole hell of a lot more, because I'm probably going to have to find somewhere else to live and completely change my entire living situation because I just spent $900 on a piece of sports memorabilia. So, there's some there's some decision making that needs to go into that, but it's got to be something so unique and special, and that's the whole thing. Like, I think a lot of that stuff has, it's personal meaning. So,
right.
You know, it's 900 grand though is just that it's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It's huge. Lastly, last thing in the breakfast wrap, man, and then we'll get out of here. So, for those of you that were Full House fans growing up, Aunt Becky, also known in the real world as Lori Loughlin, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud in the admissions bribery scandal that you guys probably remember from the last couple of years, where people would make fake athletic profiles for their kids and pay off coaches at these schools to get them into certain schools. She got 2 months of prison, $150,000 fine, 2 years supervised release, 100 hours of community service in this scandal. Is that enough?
This is a weird one because I have a hard time, like, I mean, when we talk about like the actual kind of crime and like effect that it had on people, you know, it's kind of a victimless crime. You know, I definitely think the whole, you know, the fraud aspect of it, I think, you know, there needed to be a message sent here. I just, you know, do you want someone to go to prison? You know, another person in jail kind of over it? I don't know. The whole thing is kind of, it's really fascinating. I know that there's a lot that we can get into on this subject, but you know, it's like I think, what was it, the UT tennis coach was found guilty of the same thing, right? Of
Right.
basically funneling unqualified students, if I remember, that kind of fairly unqualified students, under the premise of them being athletes to get them into the university, in this case, University of Texas. And did he face any jail time for that, when his guilty plea, or no? I
I'm
don't
not
remember.
sure. I don't know that he did. I don't think the coaches that maybe took the money got hit as hard as the people that were actually, you know, sending the money and things like, you know, obviously that guy will never coach again. But I don't know that off the top of my head, and that'll maybe something to follow up with on the back end next week. But you know, he took $100,000 in 2015 to use that. So Lori Loughlin, real quick, this is the sort of stuff that people are doing, that these rich people are doing. Created a fake athletic profile for her daughter, which included 2 gold medals on the San Diego Crew Classic in 2014 and 2016. They also took staged pictures in their house of the daughter on the rowing machine. Those are the types of things that they were doing. They were so desperate to get their daughter into USC. So I'm with you. I mean, jail time for this, it is a federal, the reason why she's going to jail is because this is obviously, when you talk about wire and mail fraud, those are federal offenses.
Yeah.
And this was actually a plea deal to get less time as opposed to the larger one. So, you know, for me, jail time to prove your point, to get that, you know, sort of set that standard. I don't mind it. And I think the punishment is fine though. You know, get a couple months. She'll probably be out in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it'll be over.
I'd be curious to see what that type of sentence would be for somebody not coming, you know, that's not a Hollywood, you know, and that, again, that's, yeah. So like, I think I think the fact that there is actually a guilty verdict in this kind of thing says a lot, and hopefully it's enough to discourage people from down the road from trying to bribe their kids into schools that they can't get in for anyway. So, you know,
Yeah, man.
you just end up hurting the kid in the long run anyway. But
It's Aunt Becky though, man. Like, you know, what would Uncle Jesse say? You know,
I don't know.
I know what he would say. He would say, "Oh, have mercy."
She's definitely the last one I would have pegged from Full House to get knocked up on wire fraud and like.
I would have definitely picked Bob Saget, 100%.
Oh yeah, easy.
You heard that guy's stand up? He's something.
Yeah, one of the filthiest comedians in history ends up being like the main character on Full House, however that worked out. But
yeah, the all-American dad just trying to make it work. Danny Tanner. What a guy. That's it, man. That's all I got for this breakfast wrap. So we can wrap it up, man.
Well, all right. I think that's a wrap for us this week. You yeah, thanks everybody for checking out the show so far. Make sure to like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell random people on the street. Social distance, of course,
Sure.
but get the word out. We're trying to fine tune this thing and get it rolling. So
Absolutely. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
see y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.
Falling on 6th on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing a swing